Good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining us as we mark the launch of our fall issue dedicated to mobility here at REVOLVE. My name is Danielle Kutka. I am a project manager at REVOLVE and also serve on the editorial board of our quarterly issue covering rotating topics of sustainability. REVOLVE is a Brussels-based communication agency, and we also have an office in Barcelona. So today I am honored to be joined with Anne Mordret from the UITP, which is the International Association of Public Transport. Anne is the feature article of our cover, the cover of our issue. UITP came out with a playbook last year. So the feature focuses on this playbook, and today we're going to be discussing some of the key challenges and solutions of the urban mobility landscape. So Anne, thank you for joining us, and please go ahead, tell us a bit about what you do at UITP and a bit about your organization.
Yeah, hello, thank you very much for the invitation to your webinar, and also for promoting our Better Urban Mobility Playbook. So we're very, very happy to be with you today. So in UITP, I'm a senior manager in the department Knowledge and Innovation. So it's a department which works actually with our members to produce knowledge, expertise to help our members and the mobility, transport and mobility, public transport and mobility community in their business. So what we do is that we produce reports, we make statistics briefs, we collect data from the mobility community, and then we also try to produce advocacy material, different types of reports, like I said. And we also work on various European projects related to urban mobility, and also third-party funded projects. So yeah, just a few words about UITP. So UITP, as Daniela said, is the International Association of Public Transport. So we are the only actually worldwide network to bring together all public transport stakeholders and sustainable mobility transport modes together. So we have around 2,000 member companies coming from 100 countries. And we have 13 offices around the world. So we are located, our headquarters are in Brussels, but we also have some offices in the MENA region, Africa, North America, Latin America, and also Asia. So we try to cover most of the world for our activities, and to bring also the services to the mobility sector. You can go to the next slide. So what we do is that we do some advocacy we engage with the decision makers and international organizations to promote sustainable mobility. We produce knowledge and expertise for our members, and we also bring people together to exchange ideas and find solutions, and also to forge partnerships. We also do a lot of networking activities for our members and non-members, actually. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, and that was for the introduction of UITP.
Fantastic. Yeah. Great, so then we can jump in then. So your first report that UITP published was more than 20 years ago, I believe. So can you explain a bit how the mobility landscape has changed in this time, and what are some of the challenges we're seeing today?
Yeah, so we had published this first edition of the Urban Mobility Playbook in 2000. And we thought it was time to update that document, because 20 years after, lots of things had changed. One of there were still some trends that has been accelerated. So, but we have seen also many different things when we started to update the playbook. So the first thing, which was already a major trend, was that urban population is growing. So by 2050, 70% of inhabitants will live in urban areas. So this means that demand for mobility is exploding, but also urban population is aging globally. So especially in Europe, the global north, Europe, Americas, China, and Japan. So this means that cities will also, and transport systems, they will also have to take this parameter into account in their developments. We also now have, but this is more recent with the COVID pandemic, more flexible working patterns. So this has also an impact on cities' overall mobility habits. And it also means that transport systems will have to adapt themselves, but also that people's mobility behaviors can change. And actually, we also saw during the pandemic that many people were going back to their private vehicles. Another major change, societal change, is that now we live in a highly connected society. So citizens want to digitalize and door-to-door services. And also one very important aspect to mention is that there is this rising awareness of climate change issues, which is really prominent now. And then if we go more in the changes around the mobility transport sector, what we have seen also when updating the playbook is that some cities in Europe have rebuilt actually the tram networks that were destroyed in the 60s, and that they are now aware that we need to put people at the heart of urban developments and no longer cars. So this means investing in public transport systems and active mobility infrastructures as well, rather than in road networks. But for the moment, there is still more investment actually in road connectivity than in public transport systems, especially in fast-growing cities. So it's an important point to consider, and we have to think and try to avoid recreating the mistakes of the past. And also another thing that we saw when updating the playbook is that there are also huge technological changes with the digital revolution, with the development of the connected, autonomous, shared and electric mobility. And then also something interesting to show is that in the last 20 years, there has also been huge investments in public transport systems. So if you look at the graph here on the left, it shows actually the opening of metro systems per decade. So from the 1860s to 2020. And you can see that for the decade of between 2010 and 2020, you had about 44 new metro lines that were opened. Most of the majority of those lines were, I think, opened in Asia and mainly in China. There were also 7 lines open, metro lines open in the MENA region, 3 in Latin America, and there has also been huge investments in the last 15 years in other parts of the world in bus rapid transit. So there is about 150 bus rapid transit lines that have also opened around the world. So this is a real trend of acceleration of development of public transport systems. And also, from the governance point of view, we see that many cities or regional national authorities have created or are actually reinforcing their institutional bodies that are in charge of mobility, so such as public transport authorities, and they are giving them more power to put in place a mobility vision and strategy. So this is a very important milestone because those organizing bodies are actually setting the basis of how the mobility system should look and what is needed for people to choose public transport over cars. And also those working bodies ensure that public transport systems receive the necessary funding. They set the regulation framework to ensure the consistency in the mobility offer, and so they make sure, they work to make sure that the systems are more easy to use for the citizens. Maybe one last point I wanted to mention is also at the urban space level. we see also an awareness that cars are using too much space in our cities. And so cities are currently investing to take back these spaces by, for example, taking out parking spaces and giving back those spaces to people by creating pedestrian areas, cycling lanes, etc. So, yeah, there are also many other changes, but you can have a look at them also in the playbook. But what we can say is that it's quite positive. There are many changes. There have been many changes in a positive way, but there are still also many challenges to overcome. We still see a growing number of private vehicles and congestion worldwide. CO2 emissions also is still on the rise. There are still lots of challenges for cities to tackle this, and without talking even about the challenge of pushing people and companies to change their own mobility behaviors.
Indeed. So yeah, the point you made on accessibility is really important, that making sure that the public transportation works for the people and that it's safe, accessible, and affordable. So what are some examples that you can highlight from UITP that some of the members are doing, or any points you have on how we can make mobility and public transport more accessible?
Yeah, so accessibility is actually one of the priority topics we are considering in UITP. And actually the term accessibility is referring to different things. So it can be the physical accessibility, so how easily you get in and out of the public transport system, both at the station and the vehicle level. But it's also about geographical accessibility, so how far are you going to walk or cycle or drive to reach a public transport station or a stop? And it also refers to affordability, so how much are you going to pay for your transport, and acceptability as well. So is your system safe and secure to use for the most vulnerable people? And for example, do you feel safe in the public transport system? So it's the term accessibility. I mean, accessibility is very important for public transport systems, and public transport systems actually play a very important role also for social and economic inclusion. So they really have to work on this accessibility, because with public transport systems, people have access to jobs, education, businesses, etc., social activities. And so, yeah, accessibility is really important. And also, if we look at some figures, we see that the global population is aging. There is also about 15% of the population who suffers from some sort of disability. So when thinking mobility for the future, we have to take into account the needs of older generation, of course, because they constitute a great part of users, but also the needs of all the different users. And it's also a matter of education, and so educating them how to use the system to help them feel comfortable and safe to use the system, to show them how it is easy, how easy to travel, how to pay your ticket, etc. So yeah, accessibility is really important. And so we see many member companies that are actually currently working on it, even though it's quite challenging for many public transport systems to improve the physical accessibility of their systems to people with reduced mobility. But in Barcelona, for instance, to give some examples, the public transport operator has included the user's perspective in their management. So everything they do or they want to implement in their system, they have a charter in which they have to make sure that the user perspective is included. So it means, for instance, training the drivers, but not only the front-end staff, but also at the management level. In Madrid, also, they have a policy with the bus operator has a policy which is called "No Passenger Left Behind." So they try to have most of their transport network accessible. They also do some communication campaigns to train kids and people with reduced mobility to use the system and show how it is safe to use and maybe how easy it can be. Another nice example I wanted to point out is Vienna, and also the public transport in the Vienna region has put in place a digital tool that informs people with reduced mobility about the accessible stations they can reach and how they can reach them. And so we see from our members that there are many initiatives to improve accessibility to people.
Fantastic. Okay, great. And you had mentioned also, so with the rise of COVID-19, that the public transport sector was one of the hardest hit. So what was the impact that COVID-19 had on the sector, and where does it stand today?
Yeah. So the COVID pandemic had a huge impact on the public transport systems. They have suffered the dramatic decrease in readership levels. So I think at the peak of the pandemic, it's about like 80% of readership that the public transport systems lost, and this was not just over a month. It was a long-term loss of readership. At the same time, the public transport systems were considered as had to continue running because they had to bring the essential workers to their destination. Mm-hmm. So there was this obligation of having to continue to operate the systems, while at the same time having a big decrease in revenues, and also a major funding problems due to the lack of funds to finance the system because of the economic crisis. And then also the system, once, let's say, they could accept customers back, they also suffered from people's behavioral change and the reduction of passengers. People were a bit afraid to go back to the network. But so here you see on the graph, which is on the bottom left, we did at UITP, we collected data from public transport networks to see where they were in terms of readership level or during the pandemic, and to see how they were recovering, etc. So to help them to see where they would stand compared to other cities. And so if you're interested in those data, we can also share them. But yeah, also what I wanted to say is that although the pandemic was really hard for public transport systems, the pandemic also pushed for developments that were also on the pipeline in cities. So for instance, we have seen lots of pop-up bike lanes, wider sidewalks. So this also had triggered positive measures to improve mobility in cities. Now, maybe just to tell you now where cities are standing. So now we see for public transport systems that for most of the networks, they are almost back to pre-2019 figures. So they're about 80 to 90% readership level, but there are still some cities like in North America that are still below. So they are still around 60 to 70% of pre-COVID figures. So we don't know exactly why people are not using the network as they used to. We think maybe it's because of the working from home habits now. So this is something that we will have to follow up as well.
Okay, very interesting. And I think let me just go through here. So in terms of, we did get a question from one of our registrants that was, is it possible to achieve sort of this idealistic equal balance between all sorts of traffic systems. I mean, you're the public, you speak on behalf of the public transport sector, but in order to make public transport inclusive, it does raise the question of the private vehicle and what the role that private vehicles and also automobiles play in the future of traffic systems in the urban landscape. So do you have any comment on this question?
Yeah, so it's a difficult question, but I think here to achieve this equal balance between the different modes, it's more let's say what the cities, what the authorities want to achieve in their cities. So what priority are they going to give? Do they want a city where everybody can use public transport systems, walk and cycle, or use also micromobility services, or do they want cities which will continue accepting a growing number of cars? So it's really a matter of authorities to try also to understand what are the needs of people and how to respond to them, but also for them to develop their vision and their strategy of mobility and try to move towards, let's say, a well-balanced system. Of course, it's not feasible to take away all cars in cities. Of course, people will still need to use cars for some of the trips, but what cities, I mean, what we try to recommend today is that for most of the trips that we do inside city centers, we can do them using public transport systems or active mobility. So, and I think here it's really the role of the city and the public transport authority to define their own vision and their own strategy. And what we always say at UITP is public transport, let's say, is the backbone of urban mobility. So metro systems like mass transit systems, and then you have as finger bones, you have then the surface transport with the buses, the trams, and also the active mobility and micromobility services or shared mobility services.
Yeah, I think that's the take-home message for me, is making transportation inclusive and involving people in that process and all stakeholders to really define, as you said, what the cities want and what the people want. So I think that's a really great message to get across. There were no other questions yet that came over from any of the participants. But I don't know if you wanted to wrap up with any last thoughts or had any other things you wanted to share on behalf of UITP, any upcoming work or any,
So we are continuing to work on preparing advocacy material, and the playbook is actually a good tool that we want to put forward also, because we think it's quite a synthetic document with easy to grab messages. So it states the different challenges that cities are facing at different levels and what solutions can be applied. So it's not a technical document, it's really a document that anybody can read and understand. And then there are also lots of references if people want to go deeper into the topic. There are all the different references that they can click on and have a look for, let's say, more technical advice. So and so at UITP we continue our work towards trying to achieve better urban mobility and sustainable cities. So it's quite a challenge, but it's a very exciting work as well.
Indeed, and we're very grateful for your contribution for this upcoming issue, and our listeners will be able to learn more on the feature article also as we launch today's issue. And we have your contact details here if they would like to get in contact with you. And yeah, thank you again for taking the time to go over these issues. I mean, mobility is something we experience on a daily basis. It's really something that, you know, people can easily get upset about. And also there's so many possibilities for improvement. And yeah, so it's great to hear about the work at UITP. And we're grateful to provide a platform for your messaging, and we'll stay tuned most certainly to any developments, and we're happy to be a partner with UITP in your upcoming work as well. So thank you so much, Anne. With that, I'll leave it. We can leave it at that. And
well, thank you very much, and looking forward to continue working with you on other topics.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you so much. And everyone that's tuning in, have a great rest of your day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Ciao.